Right now, the White House is hosting a 9-hour prayer festival on the National Mall as part of the nation's 250th birthday celebrations. The event will feature over a dozen faith leaders, almost all of them evangelical Protestant. The ceremony is facing backlash for not widely including other religions and allowing several high-ranking administration and elected officials to participate. Well, joining me now here in studio, the perfect person to talk about this with, we have the Reverend Al Sharpton, president of the National Action Network and host of MS Now's Politics Nation. So, Rev, you have the organizers who say today's gathering is going to reflect the country's Christian origins, and they hope it will spark a movement of renewal in America. Okay, but the U.S. is home to millions of many, many different faiths. So emphasizing the Protestant facet of this, that may unite those people, but what does it do to people who don't share that belief?
Well, it certainly says that they have an exclusionary theology and that they're not trying to pray for or pray with everyone and bring the country together. And they are clearly all pro-Donald Trump. I don't know how faith leaders can go to the mall and not address the fact that the sitting president just less than 30 days ago had a meme out that he posted where he was posing like Jesus. He tried to say later he was doing a doctor. A doctor does not have his hand over someone, healing them with a light of the universe in his other hand. So if anyone has made a mockery of what they claim to believe in, it's the president that they're there largely to defend.
What's interesting is our reporter, Will Duffy, who was there and reported for us last hour, said that exact point. He asked every person with whom he spoke. All of them are Donald Trump supporters, all of them practicing evangelical Christians, which is fine. But when he asked them about that, none of them said they liked it, that meme that he posted, but they found a way to explain it away. Doesn't that contradict the teachings of Christ in general, the Ten Commandments, the facts, thou shalt not lie, all the different things that Christianity stands for, the good things? How do you explain things away so cavalierly?
Well, you can't. And the real problem with that is if you're going to do it, there are different denominations in Christianity. There are different ways that we worship. But you can't take Christ out of Christianity, who stood up against the robbers in the temple, who stood up against what was going on at that time. You can't have it both ways. Religious beliefs, no matter how it is worshipped, is not interchangeable with the politics. Donald Trump crossed the line with the Jesus meme. He's crossed the line on other things. And it's one thing to say I look at a war differently, or I look at different services differently. But to say you look at the use of Jesus differently and try to explain that away, now you've crossed the line where you're more like those that were against Christ than for Christ. Why you call yourself a Christian? If they just said we want to have a right-wing rally, they have the right to do that. But to call it a prayer, well, who are you praying to and what are you saying? And what about the prayer that he was posing allegedly over some sick person with his hand up? Well, what prayer was that? Explain that.
Yeah, I can't, so I'm going to have to move on because certainly as we look at what happened yesterday, and as you know, there were the thousands who gathered in Alabama, and this was for the All Roads Lead to the South rally for black voting rights. This is after the Supreme Court decision last month in which they gutted the Voting Rights Act. You've made that walk, the ceremonial walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge a number of times there in Alabama. How did you feel watching what was happening, returning to Alabama to vote for support and protect and preserve voting rights for all Americans, but particularly black Americans, and they're in Selma with all the history?
I thought that it was reminiscent of what we've been commemorating every year. And let's not forget that we had to march across that bridge to make sure that the Voting Rights Act was renewed several times. But it also is at a time that they are right there in Selma debating. I'm going to have a Congresswoman on today that represents Selma. That they are today, in and of itself, Selma, is at question on how they're going to cut this map and try to cut out one district and only leave the district that's in place with one representative. So I think, and faith leaders helped lead yesterday. Bishop McAllister was there. We had Ebony Riley, our senior vice president of National Action Network, and all of our Alabama chapters there. There's going to be a big march August 28th in Washington around this issue on the anniversary of I Have a Dream. Many of us say, well, are we back to where we were? Those of us that have studied the movements and have been participants say it's always been where you've got to have one step forward, they're going to push one back, you keep going forward. So I'm not concerned about fighting, I'm energized about fighting, but it is disturbing because it reminds you the struggle doesn't end. Mrs. Coretta Scott King used to say, the struggle's eternal. The question is, are you going to be ready for your time in history? This is our time in history to preserve voting rights.
Let me ask you about, with regard to the lawmakers, MS Now exclusively had written by our colleague Eugene Daniels talking about Cory Booker, senator, of course, from New Jersey, more than 50 of the country's most prominent black leaders having held that emergency meeting following the Supreme Court's actions. Many attendees described last week's meetings as a part one, that there's a building of a new structure of sorts. Where does this begin?
It begins with those kinds of meetings. It has been several calls. I've been on some of them, Ebony Riley on others. And it's to come up with a plan of action that the legislators, the civil rights leadership, faith leaders can all play their part. If you go back to the 60s, that we are defending what the 60s delivered, the Voting Rights Act of 65, Civil Rights Act of 64. Everybody played their lane. You had Whitney Young and the Urban League. You had Roy Wilkins, NAACP. You had Dr. King. The march, the big march in 63, where Dr. King made the historic speech, I Have a Dream, was called by A. Philip Randolph and Labor. So we all have different lanes as long as we're on the same highway. And I think what we are seeing today is the same kind of multifaceted, multi-structured lanes where all of us are going to do what we do, from those of us that do direct action like we'll do on August 28th to those, the women leaders, which is great to see they step out. I think that it's time that we learn from our elders, but do it in our time, because with social media and technology, you can do a lot more, and you should not come with a lot less.